heavy storm wind blowing. Vinyl crackle, eerie silence.
I spring to my feet. Everything looks perfectly normal. Aisha is lying on the bed, still as a corpse. After somehow putting Celine to sleep, I retreat to my own room. There, my wife lies unconscious on the bed. Blood is still dripping, pool by pool, from her feet. Suddenly, the melodious sound of the Adhan echoes from afar. As morning breaks, the last of my courage vanishes. I cannot stay in this house for another second. I rush my wife to the hospital and take the children to my in-laws' house. But that night, Aisha starts spiraling again, just like before. She begins chanting the exact same chilling words. None of you will survive. No one will live. The game isn't over yet. What game? And where does it end? Welcome back, everyone. I hope you are all doing well and staying safe. I highly recommend listening to today's account from the very beginning to the absolute end. It is going to be a haunting journey. Without further ado, let's begin. Out from the dense fog of a freezing winter morning, a man emerges. He is wearing a long cloak, a traditional turban, and a Haji scarf. That man is none other than Junade Huzour. Walking beside him is another man draped in a golden cloak, Maulana Ibrahim Huzour. Dear listeners, before we dive into the heart of this story, remember the name Ibrahim Huzour. Because Ibrahim Huzour is a pivotal part of this terrifying event. He is Junade Huzour's close classmate, a trusted confidant, and an expert in the field of Ruqyah. So skilled that he would often surpass even Junade Huzour himself. Assalamu alaikum, dear listeners. I hope you are all doing well by the grace of the Almighty. This is Muhammad Yassin, speaking to you from a quiet corner of Gazipur. Today, I am back with another terrifying true account from Junade Huzour. I hope this story resonates with you. Please forgive any unintended errors in my retelling. I am writing this exactly as Junade Huzour described it to me. The events took place in November 2006. A biting, freezing winter had completely enveloped Gazipur. Because of the extreme cold, I had scaled back my Ruqyah work, only handling small, minor cases. On November 23rd, 2006, at around 3 a.m., I was fast asleep. Suddenly, my bed violently shuddered. I jolted awake. Opening my eyes, I could see nothing but pure, suffocating darkness. The doorbell pierced through the silence. Fear gripped me. Who could it be at this ungodly hour? Stepping cautiously toward the door, I called out, "Who's out there? What do you want so late?" Junade, it's Rayhan. Your friend, Rayhan. Hearing that name shocked me. We hadn't spoken in nearly 7 years. Without waiting, I unlocked the door. A sharp, freezing gust of wind whipped across my face. I brought Rayhan into the living room. The poor man was shivering uncontrollably. Rayhan, what are you doing in Gazipur so late? Don't you live in Chittagong? Brother, I am utterly exhausted, Rayhan whispered. I'll explain everything in the morning. I decided not to press him further.
We both went to sleep. By 9 a.m. the next morning, there was still no sign of the sun. A thick fog blanketed everything, making it feel as though rain was imminent. I took Rayhan out to the balcony. Over steaming cups of tea, I said, "Tell me everything now. You've come to me after 7 years. There must be a reason." "Yes, you're right," he replied heavily. "For some time now, terrifying things have been happening to me and my family. Let me start from the beginning. It all began 3 months ago. I have 2 sons and a daughter. My eldest, Murad, was 17. My other 2 children are 15-year-old twins. Life was peaceful. But then, out of nowhere, Murad died under deeply unnatural circumstances. We found his body lying near the bathroom sink. The entire floor was a river of blood. After rushing through the funeral, we sat in our house that night, a suffocating shroud of grief wrapping tightly around our family. In the master bedroom, my wife and I were weeping, while the twins sat in the adjacent room. Suddenly, from Murad's empty bedroom, the sound of someone singing drifted out. Calling it a song would be wrong. It was a twisted, deeply unsettling lullaby. I stepped inside the room. "Who's there? Who are you? How did you get in here?" At that moment, the singing abruptly stopped. It slowly turned around to face me. What I saw made my blood run cold. "Murad, is that you?" In a hollow, chilling voice, he whispered, "Father, why didn't you save me? It is coming. It won't let any of you live. Run while you still can." Suddenly, the power cut out. The room plunged into absolute pitch black. In the darkness, I felt someone exhaling a hot, heavy breath directly onto my shoulder. Then, a voice began whispering into my ear. I couldn't understand the words, but it sounded like Arabic. I couldn't bear the terror any longer. My knees buckled, and I blacked out. When I finally opened my eyes, I found myself lying in the exact same spot in Murad's room. Aisha and Salim were sitting by my head, weeping. My wife and I locked eyes, sharing a heavy, silent sigh. The rest of the day passed without incident. But the moment the clock struck 10 p.m., my home ceased to be a home. It transformed into a graveyard. By 12:27 a.m., The children were fast asleep in their room. My wife was sleeping soundly beside me, while I sat up reading a magazine. Suddenly, the distinct, chilling sound of ankle bells chimed from the balcony attached to our room. Setting the magazine on the nightstand, I crept toward the balcony.
I cracked the balcony door open and peered into the dark. Nothing. I brushed it off as a trick of the mind. But when I stepped back into the bedroom, I was entirely unprepared for the horror awaiting me. My wife was levitating nearly 4 feet in the air above the bed, and hovering right above her was my dead son, Murad. My wife's eyes were wide open, completely devoid of pupils, just pure, blinding white. Meanwhile, fresh blood poured from Murad's eyes. Unable to bear the terror any longer, I grabbed a vase from the table and hurled it directly at Murad. But the vase passed clean through his spectral body, shattering violently against the wall. And then, Murad grew violently hostile.
Within seconds, the shattered pieces of the vase began rising into the air, floating on their own. Suddenly, the window glass imploded with a deafening crash. 3 pitch-black crows dropped dead right at my feet. The flying shards of glass, slicing through the air, struck my wife's legs. One by one, I pulled 17 jagged pieces of glass out of her bleeding flesh. The bedsheet was completely soaked in crimson. After dressing her wounds and giving her medication, she finally drifted off to sleep. But sleep was impossible for me. I glanced at the clock. It was 2:27 a.m.
Time seemed to freeze. Suddenly, a sound echoed from the children's room. It sounded like sharp nails scratching aggressively against wood. Panic set in. I was terrified for my kids. Despite the paralyzing fear, I forced myself to walk toward their room. As I crossed the dining hall, I felt the distinct sensation of someone sprinting right behind my back. I didn't dare turn around. I pushed open the kids' bedroom door. Everything looked perfectly normal, and a wave of relief washed over me. But without warning, Ayasha bolted upright in her bed. Her long hair was thrown completely forward, masking her face. Trembling, I approached her. The moment I placed a hand on her shoulder, her body went limp, and she blacked out.
But just seconds later, her eyes snap open again. These are not human eyes. In a cracked, distorted voice, she begins to hiss. Your son started this game, and we will never let it end. Suddenly, Aisha's limbs twist violently as if she is seizing. Terrified, I scream the name of Allah, dropping to the floor and shutting my eyes tight. Out of nowhere, my son Salim cries out, "Father!" I spring to my feet. Everything looks perfectly normal. Aisha is lying on the bed, still as a corpse. After somehow putting Salim back to sleep, I retreat to my own room. There, my wife lies unconscious on the bed, blood still dripping, pool by pool from her feet. Suddenly, the melodious sound of the Adhan
echoes from afar. As morning breaks, the last of my courage vanishes. I cannot stay in this house for another second. I rush my wife to the hospital and take the children to my in-laws' house. My father passed away long ago, so my in-laws are all the family I have left. During the day, everything remains quiet. But the moment night falls, Aisha starts spiraling again, just like before. She begins chanting the exact same chilling words. None of you will survive. No one will live. The game isn't over yet. I cannot face another night of this horror. That's why I rushed straight to you without waiting. I can't take it anymore, brother. Please, tell me how to escape this torment. Rayhan goes silent. His story leaves me completely speechless, unsure of what to even say. Right then, I make up my mind. I will solve this dark mystery, inshallah. There is no time to lose. That very night, I board the Mahanagar Express. The departure time is 9:20 p.m. A bitter, freezing chill fills the air. The train surges forward into the dark night at its own steady pace. But the terror is already following close behind us. Around 2 a.m., completely exhausted, I rested my head against the seat and drifted off to sleep. Suddenly, I plunged into a dream. A vast, open field swallowed by the night. It felt like a full moon, casting a faint, ghostly glow over the landscape. To the right of the field stood a massive, towering tree, and to the left, another. From the distance, the eerie wailing of jackals echoed through the air. Out of nowhere, a single white silhouette appeared, pursued by 5 pitch-black shadows. The white figure looked like a child, sprinting for its life, while the dark entities hunted it down. Suddenly, the white silhouette dissolved into thin air. The black shadows froze. Then, slowly, they turned and began rushing straight toward me. I was paralyzed, unable to move a single muscle. Suddenly, one of the entities wrapped its cold hands around my throat, choking the life out of me. I fought desperately to breathe, to scream, but no sound came out. Just as I was losing hope, a violent jolt shook my entire body, and I snapped awake. Opening my eyes, I realized we had arrived in Chittagong. The clock read 4:12 a.m. It takes nearly 3 hours to travel from the station to Rayhan's place. As we stepped outside, I spotted Rayhan's brother-in-law waiting for us with a car. By 8 a.m., we finally reached his in-laws' house. We dedicated that first day entirely to rest. Early the next morning, we set out for Rayhan's actual house. Arriving at the property, I was stunned. It was a luxurious, grand duplex. However, it stood completely isolated, with no other houses in sight. A small local market sat a 5-minute walk away, but the rest of the area was pure, quiet countryside. The moment we crossed the threshold, a sickening odor of decay hit my nose. Stepping into Rayhan's bedroom, I discovered the source of the stench. The bedsheets were heavily stained with dried blood. I immediately took the sheet outside and burned it. Oddly, the house itself felt completely quiet now. Our priority was to locate the epicenter of this dark energy.
I stepped into Murad's room and began searching for clues, hoping to find anything that could explain the haunting. On his study desk, I uncovered an old diary. But the exact moment my fingers touched the cover, the atmosphere in the room turned suffocatingly heavy. Outside, the bright, sunny weather instantly transformed into chaos. Lightning cracked, followed by a violent, torrential downpour. Suddenly, I felt the distinct sensation of someone darting right past my back. I whipped around, but the room was empty. Calling Rayhan into the room, I asked if he knew anything about the journal. He looked at it, terrified, and swore he had never seen this diary before in his life.
I slipped the diary into my shoulder bag to examine it later. I searched every corner of the house, but found nothing else. The root of the problem remained a complete mystery. During the day, the house was quiet, shielded by the roar of torrential rain and crashing thunder outside. But the moment night fell, the entire atmosphere shifted. An oppressive, suffocating silence took over, broken only by the sharp chirping of crickets and the distant, haunting wails of stray dogs and jackals. It felt as though we had stepped directly onto a horror movie set. By 8 p.m., I finally pulled the journal from my bag and cracked it open. It was a record of Murad's daily life.
The first 10 pages read like a normal teenager's diary. But starting from page 11, the words became so terrifying that they bypassed anything I could have ever imagined. I will read his exact entries, page by page. From pages 11 to 14. The day was Tuesday. I've always been obsessed with the paranormal. Just once in my life, I want to see a jinn or a spirit. I am ready to do whatever it takes to witness the unseen. I began digging through the darkest corners of the internet, searching for ways to summon them. I started performing rituals.
Knowing I couldn't perform these rituals alone, I dragged my friend Hasib and my siblings into it. They were driven by pure curiosity. From there, I kept experimenting with different formulas and dark rites. Pages 15 to 17. The biggest mistake of my life was the Ouija board. The board itself is simple, but I made the game infinitely more dangerous by binding it to an occult ritual. Before we even began, each of us sliced our fingers and dropped 2 drops of fresh blood directly onto the board. Then the game started. We all gathered around, and our very first question was,
Is there a jinn near us right now? The planchette started sliding, and eventually something answered. We offered it friendship. We asked, Are you a good spirit? The board moved to no. When we asked how many there were, it answered 3. Up to that point, we thought it was a game. But then, we asked a question we never should have uttered. We asked, Do you want to kill us? The planchette slid heavily to
yes. We were entirely unprepared for that response. Terrified, we shoved the board away, and that's when my eyes involuntarily drifted toward the dresser mirror. In the reflection, I saw 3 pitch-black shadows standing right behind Aisha. One entity was clawing viciously at her head, while another was trying to bite her. Tearing my eyes away from the glass, I looked over at my friends. Every single one of them had passed out from sheer terror. Pages 18 to 20. When I finally woke up, I was still on the floor in that exact spot. From the distance, the morning Adhan was echoing. I rushed over to wake the others. We all sat on the bed in a daze, trying to process the nightmare we had just survived. Ultimately, consumed by fear, we decided to hide everything from our parents, fearing they would scold us.
Around 9 a.m., as I was getting ready for college, the doorbell rang. My mother asked me to answer it. I opened the door to find a gaunt, ragged man, covered from head to toe, his neck, arms, waist and forehead wrapped in bizarre occult talismans. In a harsh, gravelly voice, he muttered, "Give something in the name of the powerful forces, boy. It will bring you favor." I couldn't comprehend his words. No ordinary beggar asks for charity like that. Then he whispered, "I know what happened to you last night." I froze in shock. He thrust a tiny book into my hands and vanished into thin air. I left the book on my desk and hurried to college.
At college, a horrific incident shook the campus. A student had brutally stabbed a classmate. The attacker's name was Diane. Rumor had it that Diane was heavily addicted to something dark, and he claimed he was commanded to commit the crime. Apparently, he regularly frequented a hidden website. This piqued my curiosity, plunging me into the rabbit hole of the dark web. I paused my reading there. The dark web? How was this tied together? Glancing at the clock, I realized it was already 2:45 a.m. I decided to read the rest later and try to get some sleep. I slid the diary under my pillow and tried to rest. Outside, the rain poured down, accompanied by violent lightning. Just as I began to drift off, a twisted melody drifted into my ears. Then, a chilling voice whispered, "Don't look behind you. Your angel of death has arrived." A cold sweat rolled down my face. Suddenly, a deafening crash erupted. Terrified, I collapsed onto the floor. The clock read 3:14 a.m. Realizing sleep was a lost cause, I decided to read the rest of the diary. Pages 21 to 26. With Diane's help, I managed to access that specific website and created an account. It was filled with disturbing footage and bizarre occult rituals. Terrified by one video, I slammed my laptop shut, but right before the screen went black, a strange message flashed across it. Suddenly, my phone buzzed with a notification. An unknown sender had emailed me an attachment. I opened it, and my blood ran cold. It was a photo of me, taken from the front, sitting at my laptop the previous night. I shivered with fear, yet a sick part of me felt a thrill. This was the thrill I had been seeking. I opened the laptop again, diving back into the site. After witnessing a few more unexplainable phenomena, my courage finally broke. I shut it down and went to bed. Sometime around 2 or 3 a.m., The laptop was wide open. A faint, ghostly glow emanated from the screen, illuminating the empty chair. Trembling, I forced myself to sit at the desk. Glaring back at me from the screen was a direct file link. Looking at it paralyzed my entire body. I felt an overwhelming certainty that these horrific events were actively targeting me. I didn't dare turn around. I could only stare blankly at the screen. Suddenly, the power cut out. I let out a blood-curdling scream and blacked out. When I woke up, I lied to my parents, telling them it was just a nightmare. But I confessed everything to my siblings and my friend Hasib. Driven by curiosity, they begged to see the footage. I didn't refuse, reckoning that watching it together might lessen the terror. Pages 26 to 31. It was 11 p.m. We gathered round the glowing laptop and clicked the link. Right in the middle of the video, 3 distinct knocks echoed from the front door. We trembled with fear. Slowly, we cracked the door open. There was no one. We checked our parents' room, but they were fast asleep. So who had knocked on our door? After that night, none of us ever dared to look at that footage again. But like clockwork, every single night at exactly 12:12 a.m., a new email would flash on my phone. The messages always said the same thing. Someone was waiting for us, demanding that we watch more videos. Consumed by panic, I sold my laptop immediately. But that's when the psychological torture truly began. Sleep became impossible. Whenever I managed to close my eyes, that hideous shadow haunted my dreams. A week passed in this waking nightmare. Then, out of nowhere, I remembered the tiny book the ragged beggar had handed me. Late that night, I pulled it from my desk drawer. It was a 72-page text filled with hidden occult rituals. Most of the rituals were minor, but the very last one, detailing a powerful summoning practice, caught my eye. The next day, I made up my mind to perform it alongside my friends and siblings. I studied the instructions so many times that they were practically etched into my memory. And that is where the diary entries end. There is no record of what happened next. Closing the journal, I felt utterly lost. The clock read 4:12 a.m. The time had come. I needed to call upon my allies. I summoned the jinn entities. Before I could even blink, they materialized in the darkness around me, and our consultation began. I laid bare everything I had discovered in the diary, but they remained entirely silent. "Why is everyone quiet?" I demanded into the dark. "Speak to me!" In a hollow, low-pitched voice, Ismail spoke. "Huzour, you still do not possess the full story. To unravel this curse, we must uncover the exact cause of Murad's death. Since the diary is empty, you must interrogate those who were physically present with him during the ritual." I replied, there were 3 others with him, Murad's siblings and his friend. "Then it is settled," Ismail murmured. "Tomorrow, command Aisha and Selim to confess everything they know. Only then will we determine our next move." After concluding the meeting, I collapsed onto my bed. Suddenly, a slow, rhythmic dripping sound echoed through the dark. Tap. 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 A sudden blood-curdling scream shatters the silence of the night. The investigator rushes into a dead boy's bedroom to find his friend Rayhan levitating in a grotesque, bone-snapping posture, bleeding heavily, while a pitch-black shadow entity stands beside him.
I refused to get out of bed, freezing in place. But just as my eyes began to heavy lid, a blood-curdling scream from Rayhan tore through the silence. I dashed into his room, but it was completely empty. Then he shrieked again. This time, the sound came from Murad's bedroom. I sprinted toward the door and threw it open. What I saw inside made my stomach turn. Rayhan was suspended just above the floor, dark blood streaming rapidly from his nose and ears.
His arms were twisted backward at a grotesque, bone-snapping angle, his legs forced upward in a completely unnatural posture. And standing directly to his left was a towering, pitch-black shadow entity. I knew instantly we were dealing with an absolute demonic malice.
I recited powerful incantations over a glass of water and splashed it onto Rayhan and around the room. The moment the holy water struck Rayhan's skin, it hissed and vaporized into thick steam, exactly like drops of water hitting a scorching hot skillet. Rayhan collapsed, losing consciousness. After moving him safely to his bed, I returned to Murad's bedroom. This portal had to be sealed immediately, or the collateral damage would be catastrophic. Reciting protective verses, I blew onto 4 heavy iron nails and drove them into the 4 corners of the room. For the rest of the night, the haunting ceased. At daybreak, I rushed Rayhan to the hospital and set out immediately for his in-laws' estate.
When I arrived, I was met with a horrific sight. Aisha was bound to a window frame with thick ropes. Her once vibrant skin had turned unearthly dark and completely withered, shriveled as if decayed. Yet when I first met her, she was strikingly beautiful. What could have caused such a gruesome transformation? I pulled Rayhan's father-in-law aside and asked what had happened. In a voice trembling with terror, he whimpered, "Don't ask, Huzour. The moment you and Rayhan left for the duplex yesterday, a madness took over Aisha. She began screaming foul, ungodly obscenities. When we offered her food, she tore into it with both hands like a beast, constantly scratching and thrashing to escape the house.
We somehow managed to restrain her during the day," the old man continued.
But when midnight struck, the nightmare escalated. Aisha and Salim were sleeping in their quarters when a blood-curdling shriek from the boy woke the entire house. We burst into the room, and what I saw is an image I will spend the rest of my life trying to erase. Aisha had pinned Salim down, burying her teeth deep into his shoulder. I stood there, utterly paralyzed by his words. Rayhan's entire family was now mutilated, scattered across hospital beds. I approached the bound Aisha, forcing her chin upward. Grabbing a glass of water, I began chanting verses of absolute banishment, breathing heavily onto the liquid.
The moment my breath touched the water, its color shifted into a faint, ethereal gold. Raising my voice to a booming crescendo, I commanded the entity to break and hurled the liquid directly into Aisha's face. She let out a horrific, piercing scream
screech and went completely limp. We laid her gently onto the mattress. 5 agonizing minutes later, her eyelids fluttered open. Her eyes were normal again. The demonic presence had fled. Wasting no time, I leaned in close. "Aisha, I know you are in no condition to speak right now," I urged. "But if you want to save what is left of your family, you must tell me the absolute truth. I have read Murad's diary. I know about the ritual you performed."
"I know up to that point. But what happened next? Tell me everything. Remember, the lives of your family depend entirely on your next words."
Aisha wept, crying out, "Huzour, you don't understand. The worst details were never written in that journal. You read about that dark website, right? The moment he logged into it, Murad became a shell of a person. He stopped eating, grew violently aggressive, locked himself in the dark, and couldn't sleep a single wink. He kept screaming that a shifting shadow was stalking his every move. Eventually,
We uncovered the final step of the ritual. I begged Murad to stop, but he was completely consumed. So, on a bleak Thursday, right after the Asr prayer, we walked directly into our village's oldest, most cursed graveyard.
we searched frantically for the oldest plot. Finally, our eyes locked onto a crumbling, ancient grave. I decided to bury the ritual bottle right there. Then, following the internet instructions, we gathered 7 handfuls of dirt from 7 different graves, packing them into a clay pot alongside Murad's full name, just as dictated by the diary. Right in the middle of the rite, the sky roared. A cold drizzle fell, split by sudden lightning. Out of the darkness, a blinding luminescence surged toward Murad. Something unearthly was physically dragging itself out of that light.
After that, my memory blanks out. Selim told me later that whatever crawled out of that flash possessed my body. It claimed it had chosen me.
Aisha goes silent. Hearing this, the truth finally becomes clear to me. That malevolent entity was the one that slaughtered Murad. Now that the origin is exposed, the counter-ritual can begin.
I instructed Aisha's grandfather to move her to her paternal home immediately, accompanied by her uncle. Since the demonic presence was anchored to her, performing the extraction there would be much cleaner. Leaving the clinic, I tracked down Rayhan and broke the news. He was physically recovering, though his wife remained deeply comatose. I debated searching for their friend Hasib, but decided against it. We all regrouped at Rayhan's duplex. We securely bound Aisha's limbs to the heavy bedposts. With the room locked down, external entities couldn't breach it. But to allow my spiritual allies into the fray, I had to pry out the enchanted iron nails. Within 5 seconds of removing the final nail,
Aisha began to violently distort. Her eye sockets turned pitch black. Her lips stretched into a horrific, taut grin, and dark blood leaked from her ears. Still tightly bound, her body levitated over 2 feet into the air, violently thrashing and slamming back down 4 times. A sickening, animalistic, guttural growl tore from her throat. Up until now, her eyes had remained shut. Suddenly, her movements stilled. She slowly opened her lids and hissed, "It's useless, Junade. You cannot save her."
Identify yourself. Why have you infested this family? The entity offered no reply. I immediately initiated the Ruqya. The demon raged, thrashing against the ropes to tear me apart. Then, with a resounding crash, the bedroom door flew open. My 7 ally jinn charged into the perimeter, unleashing a deafening, unified recitation of holy verses. The invading demon convulsed in absolute agony. A violent spiritual war raged for minutes until Aisha's body finally went completely limp, slipping into unconsciousness. Instantly, a dead silence consumed the room. I collapsed onto the floor, completely drained and uncertain of the next step. Rayhan and Aisha's uncle finally regained consciousness. I instructed them, "Secure Aisha with heavy chains. I need a moment." I retreated to the rooftop to consult my guides. Ismail whispered out of the shadows, "Huzour, these entities possess terrifying power. It is not just spiritual malice. They wield a devastating physical strength." Adnan asked, "Ismail, what are you suggesting? Whose aid do we enlist?" Ismail replied, "We must summon Ibrahim Huzour."
You know as well as we do, Huzour, in the realm of Ruqya, a more formidable exorcist does not exist. Call him immediately. Until he arrives, lock Murad's room and stay clear of Aisha. Ismail's counsel mirrored my own thoughts. I placed the call to Ibrahim, and he confirmed he was setting out right away. By 8 a.m., Ibrahim arrived. We sat on the roof, and I detailed the horrors from the very beginning. Ibrahim noted grimly, "Junade, it's clear. The entity occupying Aisha is the exact same demon that slaughtered Murad. Our absolute priority now is to force a total confession from its mouth." Around 9 p.m., we stepped into Murad's cursed bedroom. Ibrahim systematically pulled out every single protective nail, and instantly the demonic force seized Aisha's body. Reaching into his coat, Ibrahim pulled out a vial of consecrated soil. Muttering Bismillah, he forced the blessed earth down her throat. Within seconds, the demon inside Aisha began screaming in absolute agony, thrashing wildly. "I'll speak! I'll tell you everything! Just give me water!" it shrieked. But Ibrahim stood his ground, refusing to offer a drop. He knew the demon's tricks. This was a highly specific, sacred earth. The suffocating torment would only lift when it spoke the absolute, unvarnished truth. Eventually, Aisha's manic thrashing stopped. She was going to confess. Suddenly, a horrific voice, a distorted blend of both male and female tones, tore from her throat. "I am Sukran, a jinn of the ancient Ifrit bloodline. For centuries, I was imprisoned beneath a sacred stone, bound by a holy saint. Before his passing, he wrote the secret of my release into a tiny book and cast it into the river. He was guarded by 56 warrior jinn. But one day, one of my loyal kind recovered that book and delivered it to this girl's brother, Murad. It was Murad who broke my seals, and the moment I tasted freedom, I slaughtered him." With that final chill, the entity receded, and Aisha blacked out. We stood there, paralyzed. After hammering the protective nails back into the walls, we gathered to strategize.
Ibrahim broke the silence. You heard it all. We must combine our knowledge now. How do we destroy it? Sushil noted grimly. An Ifrit jinn cannot be killed. It is impossible. We all agreed. It had to be contained. Ismail stood up. Then let us waste no more time. We trap the demon tonight. We nodded in grim agreement. Ibrahim reached into his vest, pulling out a vial of holy water, a small bottle of attar, and an empty glass jar. Keep these close, Junade, he instructed heavily. You know exactly when to strike. Our strategy was set. Glancing at the clock, it was exactly 12:13 a.m. Uttering Bismillah, we stepped into the kill zone. We pried every single iron nail from the walls. Outside, a legion of 10 allied jinn wrapped the room in an invisible spiritual barrier,
cutting us off entirely, so no other demonic forces could breach the perimeter. We unchained Aisha's limbs. Within seconds, the ancient Ifrit seized her body once more. She began sprinting frantically along the walls like a caged beast. Ibrahim raised his hand, spat a heavy blessing over the holy water, and hurled it directly at her. The moment it struck her flesh, Aisha collapsed onto the floor, screaming in agonizing torment. Rayhan and his brother-in-law pinned her down immediately. Rayhan and I recited holy verses in a deafening rhythm, our allied jinn echoing the chants in unison. I forced the rim of the empty glass jar against Aisha's lips, pouring the residual holy water over her crown while pressing the pungent attar to her nostrils. Her limbs locked up, turning stiff as stone. Suddenly, a heavy blow struck my back. I whipped around. Standing there in the shadows were young Salim and another boy, Hasib. How were they here? Salim was supposed to be sedated in a hospital bed, and Hasib knew nothing of this place. Instantly, I knew they were possessed. The entity was playing its final card. Dark fluid oozed from the bite mark on Salim's neck, while Hasib brandished a jagged knife, slashing wildly through the air.
Thinking fast, Ibrahim smashed a heavy vase against Hasib's skull, knocking him out cold. He dragged both boys out into the hallway, slamming the heavy door shut and locking it tight, while we pushed through the ritual inside. For over an hour,
without wasting a breath, we grabbed the jar and sprinted out toward the river. As we raced into the pitch black, the chilling sound of hundreds of invisible footsteps seemed to chase us from behind. We shoved the glass jar into a massive clay pot and sunk it deep into the rushing, dark river currents. But Ibrahim grabbed my shoulder, his face pale. Junade, it isn't over. We must break the curse at the graveyard. The hair and fingernails Murad buried there are still binding the dead. Those souls will never find peace. Right then, the sky broke. A catastrophic storm was brewing. After a frantic search through the thrashing rain, we located the crumbling ancient plot. Near the foot of the grave sat a small hollow opening. Uttering Bismillah, Ibrahim reached his arm deep into the dirt. Suddenly, his eyes widened in sheer panic. He couldn't pull his hand back out. It looked as though something from deep within the coffin was violently dragging him under.
Acting on instinct,
I scooped up a handful of earth, spat a defensive prayer over it, and fired it directly at Ibrahim's trapped arm. The unseen grip shattered, allowing him to break free. We unearthed the buried remnants and burned them to ash. We stood in the downpour, offering desperate prayers for the souls of the 7 desecrated graves. As the heavy rain washed over the cemetery, I locked eyes with Ibrahim. Today, truth has triumphed once more, I breathed. We shared a fleeting sigh of relief.
It was time to return to Gazipur, but a dark instinct told me our work wasn't finished. We walked back into the duplex, soaked to the bone, only to be met with an absolute horror. The Ifrit was gone, but it hadn't left empty-handed. In its retreat, the entity had spirited away both Selim and Hasib into the dark web of the unseen. May Allah have mercy on our souls. Left with no other options, we bound Aisha to a 41-day strict spiritual protection rite and retreated back to Gazipur.
Junade Huzour let out a deep, heavy sigh as he finished his tale. For a split second, it felt as though his soul had slipped right back into that house of horrors in Chittagong. My friends, this was the terrifying true account told directly by Junade Huzour. I still keep Murad's cursed diary locked away. I have scanned every single line, translating its madness word for word for you tonight. I truly hope this dark account has kept you on the edge of your seats. This is Yasin.